Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about business law and the Constitution. One of the topics we must discuss is the First Amendment, your right to free speech. Now, I can think of a lot of times when I was in elementary school. I remember a teacher who, there was a young kid in our class who said something inappropriate, and the teacher scolded him and said, "You can't say that," and he jumped up and said, "Well, I have the right to free speech." So we have this belief, right, that we have this absolute, unstoppable ability to say things because this First Amendment is so ingrained in who we are as a nation. The First Amendment to the Constitution is that right to free speech. Now, it is one of our most important constitutional rights, and it is deeply important to who our nation is, and we're even seeing that right now as we talk about this and with the ability of freedom of the press versus the office of the president, right? But we often misunderstand free speech because we think it is, that there is no limit to what we can do. There are absolute limits. There are things the government can control, and so that's what we need to. We're going to talk about and look at and say, okay, so how far does our right to free speech extend, and where are the limitations, and where can the government step in? We could spend a whole class, an entire class. I had one in law school that was all about the First Amendment, and we don't have time for that. This is going to be like a 10 or 15 minute overview of the First Amendment, so you're not going to get a thorough understanding, but just to give you some sense of its limitations and and also the things that this right to free speech protects. So the Constitution, the First Amendment of the Constitution states essentially that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. And that sounds pretty broad. It's not that broad because there are a lot of places where the government wants and has the ability to regulate it. I remember another time from high school when we had students who were kind of grouping up, and this is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and so they referred to it as a gang, but it wasn't really a gang. It was just a bunch of students who all wore Insane Clown Posse t-shirts. Now, if you remember ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, it is a very odd duo of musicians who make some interesting music, but have tapped into the psyche of a group of individuals who identify with the way they dress and what they stand for. And they have this whole event called the Meetup of the Juggalos. So Google the Insane Clown Posse, listen to some of their music. There's a song called Miracles that you could search on YouTube, and it will enlighten you. Let's put it that way. And if you want to take a look at there's some really interesting videos on the meeting of the Juggalos on YouTube too. If you want to see a curious subsection of America. So, okay, so they came. Our school administrators came in and they said, anyone wearing Insane Clown Posse T-shirts would be sent home. And so there were several students who were an outcry that their right to free speech was being abridged because they couldn't wear this ICP T-shirt and project this identity. So could the school do it? Were they violating the Constitution, or did they have that right? Well, we have very few. We have few, but they're broad, but areas where the government does have the ability to regulate free speech. One of those is in schools, and when we want to create an environment that is best suited in public schools for learning and order and structure. And if the school had believed that there was a group of people that was being disorderly or causing some kind of disruption, and arguably there was, because you had this group who sort of identified with this design and were kind of calling themselves the ICP gang, and just sort of getting into trouble under the banner of ISCP, then the school had the ability to say, this is disruptive to the classroom environment. We're not going to allow you to wear it. Same with the young student in elementary school who swore in class, said something inappropriate, was disruptive to the academic environment, and they had the ability to the teacher had the ability to tell them that he couldn't say that. We have other places. You can't go into the Mall of America and make a bomb threat, right? Yell that you've got a gun or you've got. That's absolutely. You would be arrested on the spot, and tased. So don't do that. And the reason we don't allow you to do that, even though that's one place where we limit the right to free speech, is because it causes other people to panic. It's going to cause fear, and we don't want to create public environments where there is a reason to be fearful, a reason to run, and it's the old, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because people would panic and run out, and people would get trampled and injured. And so there are things you can't say that cause panic, cause disruption in public environments. So those are some basic limitations. Now it's not all that clear, but those are two categories where your right to free speech is absolutely limited, and the government has that ability, and for good reasons, right? Now there are three kinds of speech, and we're going to look at one of them in this video. We've got non-commercial speech, and that's you and I talking. That's the if non-commercial is you're not selling anything. No sale, no selling. This is not advertising, it's not marketing, it's just you and I talking. It's the conversation in the mall, it's the conversation in the classroom, non-commercial speech. And then we have commercial speech that is non-misleading. And the third one is commercial speech that is misleading. So essentially, these two are advertising, right? These are advertising, and one of them is truthful and one of them is lying. Okay? Now we are going to save this for the next video, and we're going to focus right now on commercial speech, where you're not advertising, it's just public discussion. So for the government to be able to regulate non-commercial speech, to regulate, the government has to have a compelling government interest. A compelling government interest. Now, this has got to be very, very, very significant. The government has to really have a reason that it wants to limit you. Now, again, the school environment is a compelling reason. We want a orderly, functional, safe environment at schools, and we give our schools and principals a lot of ability. We want another example of compelling interest would be that yelling the bomb threat in the mall or an airport, right? We do not want to cause panic. Hate speech falls into this too. We don't want it's a gray area of what constitutes hate speech, but we have very good reasons that we don't want to allow hate speech and hate crime. And so the government has said these rise to the level of compelling, but it's got to be really significant. Like the bomb threat in the mall, like you can completely understand where you can completely see what crosses the line. So I want to show you, give you a case example of a First Amendment case that I was not specifically involved in, but worked kind of tangentially to with the lawyer who was leading this case, and it is the Bong Hits for Jesus case, and I've got a little video on YouTube that you should have watched or are going to watch. And if you don't know what this is a bong, this is a bong hit. Okay, so the Bong Hits for Jesus case is what took place in Alaska, and it was when the Olympic torch was coming through Juneau, and it went through a street that was close to the high school. So the high school decided that this was a significant event, so we were going to let the students out to go down and watch the Olympic torch walk through, run through the city streets. So all these kids go down there. They are off school property, but they have been let out of school, so it would be during or around school hours. And one of the students, as the Olympic torch comes by, and all the media, right across from all the newspapers and TV cameras, he unfurls this banner that says "Bong hits for Jesus," and he actually had anything that he meant by it. He just thought it was funny. And the high school principal comes and tears it down and sort of takes some disciplinary action. And so the student sues and says, well, this was my free speech because I was not on school property. Now, if they were on the high school property, absolutely. So the question here was whether, there was a compelling government interest when you're no longer on school property. Now, this may seem like some minutia, but this case went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a big deal because it's questioning, and at the heart of it is saying, where is the school? Is the school just this functional, just this area that the school property, or does it get bigger? Does it extend depending on, and then of course the ability to regulate speech? Does it extend physically with where the students are? Well, I think if you were on a field trip and you took the students in a bus someplace, you would probably say, well, that's still during school, it's still a school function. Well, this wasn't exactly a school function, right? It's a public function, but it was during school hours. They were let out of school, and so this was a fairly hotly debated question, and the Supreme Court ended up coming down on the side of the school and saying that because it was let out of school, it was like a school function, even though it wasn't on school property. And the principal had the ability to take it down. But you can see how here we have this judge-made law, this common law that's being created as new scenarios come up. And your right to free speech is being minimized in some areas and government regulation being increased. Sometimes it happens the other way. A couple other examples here. We had is liking something on Facebook, just hitting a little button that gives the thumbs up, is that free speech? Is that speech, right? It's not, you're not talking, it's symbolic. Well, there was an interesting case where a sheriff in, I believe, Arizona, a local sheriff was running an election campaign, and some members of the sheriff's department liked the opponent of the sheriff. And so that sheriff decided to fire the people who liked his campaigning opponent. And those who pressed the little like button for the opponent decided to sue that this was a violation of free speech. And the question, certainly this is not something that the government has a compelling interest, right? It does not have a compelling interest to limit people's voices in elections, even if you work for the government, or at least work for the sheriff's department. You still have some ability to say who you want to vote for, right? And so there's no compelling government interest. So then the remaining question was, is this even speech? And so again, here's something that the Constitution hasn't predicted Facebook. It hasn't predicted symbolic liking. And I think most of us would say, yeah, it's you now express things through emojis and symbols and images. A GIF or a YouTube video could be, a post could be free speech. It could be speech. And so the court came down and actually extended what speech is now to adapt to technology. One thing that happened during the election is that we had something new called ballot selfies. And I don't know if any of you took a picture of yourselves while you were voting. Justin Timberlake did and got into some trouble. But in a lot of states, it is illegal to take a photo of your ballot. Some states have said no photos of ballots. So people are taking pictures of their ballots, who they voted for, posting them as proof that they voted, posting them on Facebook, maybe you did this. And there are questions about whether this is speech or whether there's a compelling government interest. And what might that compelling government interest be? Well, does it encourage voter fraud. So Starbucks, for instance, the barista doesn't give it to you if you voted for somebody in particular. There's potentially voter fraud, or at least there's potentially buying. Starbucks could be accused of buying somebody's vote or giving somebody something to vote. And we are very cautious about that. Even if they don't say who to vote for, we're very concerned. We're very against offering anything to get somebody to vote, because this happens, right? That you can say, well, hey, you go vote for this person, and we'll give you a Starbucks or whatever, or we'll give you money. So we're very, very concerned about that. There is a compelling government purpose in that. So does the ballot selfie rise to this level? I think states will still try to figure it out, but it's a good question. Some of you are familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church, and that they go out to funerals of fallen soldiers, of same-sex marriage, weddings, and then they protest and they say very terrible things. And these are some of the only signs I could find that weren't that I could actually show you. And so, is there a compelling government interest to regulate what they say? Well, they're one that edges into that hate speech category, but they sort of tiptoe the line, right? They go right up to it, but they don't cross it. And so the challenge here is that they've never done anything that has arisen to a compelling government purpose. Like, sure, they are on the street corner, but they're in public places, and they don't physically, attack anyone, but they are saying things. And so the government's not found a way to regulate, to stop them from saying what they're doing, but they have found some ways to sort of strike a balance of saying, well, okay, you can go out and you can protest these funerals, but you need to be on the other side of the street, because we have a compelling interest to allow the family and to get to the funeral, and we have a compelling interest to allow traffic. If you're blocking traffic, there's a compelling interest to stop a protest, right? If you want to, and so we've struck this balance of saying here are some limitations, but we can't outright stop you from saying what you're saying. So again, here's a really quick assessment of the First Amendment. You get some ideas on how it's limited and how it's expanding. So the thing that I really want you to take away is that with non-commercial speech, we're talking in public, there's nothing being sold or advertised, you can say what you want, as long and the government will only be able to regulate it if they have a compelling purpose, a compelling government interest. Otherwise, you can say what you want to. It's the First Amendment.